Bonjour à tous. Donc, comme l'a indiqué Jean-Baptiste, donc cette journée va être ponctuée en quatre temps, va être organisée en 4 temps. 3 pays vont nous intéresser en premier lieu et après nous allons faire un tour d'horizon un peu plus général. Et donc le premier pays qui va nous intéresser, donc c'est l'Allemagne, qui, comme vous le savez, a lancé son Energie 22 depuis plusieurs années. Et nous avons donc 2 intervenants. Le premier, c'est Bastian Hoffmann, qui travaille au laboratoire EDF European Institute for Energy Research, qui est un laboratoire commun créé en partenariat entre l'université de Karlsruhe et EDF. Et donc Bastian va nous faire une présentation sur les tenants et aboutissants de l'Energie 22 en donnant des éléments d'actualité sur les tensions et les évolutions dans la mise en œuvre de cette politique. Et puis après, nous aurons Jens Köhrsen du Centre de religion, économie et politique de l'Université de Bâle, qui va nous présenter les choses sous l'angle des villes, des communes. Et là aussi décliner le concept d'Energie 22 justement à l'échelle des territoires des communes. Voilà, alors ce que je vous propose, c'est que donc chaque intervenant intervienne pendant une demi-heure, déroule le fil de sa présentation et arrive à bien communiquer ses messages. On enchaîne sur le deuxième intervenant et puis après on aura une demi-heure pour débattre des questions sur chacune des présentations et puis des choses un peu transverses qui transparaissent au-delà des choses et puis pouvoir aussi bénéficier des apports des uns et des autres qui connaissent aussi le sujet et qui sont présents dans la salle. Eh bien, Bastian Hoffmann, Bastian, je te passe la parole.
Merci. So I will switch to English. So if you're not so fluent in English now, it's a good time, good moment to put in the casket. So thank you, Mark, and thank you, Simon, for both the introduction, but also for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you today and to open this workshop with the first presentation, which is on the German energy transition at crossroads, a critical review of where we are. As Mark already said, IFER is a research institute located in Karlsruhe. We're doing a lot of research activities. From my part, I'm working with a small team that is following and analyzing regulations across Europe, and we are doing this with a strong exchange with our partners at EDF R&D and also EDF business units. So if we look at the German energy transition, it's a very broad field. And well, I tried to structure it a little bit. So first of all, there are a lot of economic aspects, like what is the right market design that we need to address the challenges of the energy transition. There are a lot of technical aspects like the network operation, network development, but also a lot of political aspects like allocation of costs and benefits, achieving of climate objectives, and all this governance between local, national, regional, and European level. In the center, I would put the regulation, which is somehow connecting the different aspects that I just mentioned. I will try to enter a bit into the details of the different elements that you can see here, starting a bit more with the global picture of the energy transition, and then moving more and more towards local questions. And then in the presentation from Jens, we will enter more into details of specific local aspects. So if we look at the energy transition, the German Energiewende, it's already hard to identify the starting point. So it might start even maybe in the year 2000 when the German government presented its Renewable Energy Act, but even beforehand there was some development. The first time, however, that Germany really presented some long-term objectives that they want to achieve in the energy sector, that was with the energy concept in the year 2010. So here they presented objectives for the year 2050, like 80% of renewable energy in the electricity mix, a reduction of 80% of CO2 emissions compared to the reference year 1990, but also 50% primary energy savings compared to 2008. There is something missing, maybe for some of you, and that's the nuclear phase-out. However, in the year 2010, in this energy concept, nuclear phase-out was not included. It was rather something that was added with the Fukushima event, or right after the Fukushima event in the year 2011. In 2010, the government even aimed at the prolongation of nuclear power. So you can see this in this kind of advertisement of the German opposition. So they made some jokes citing what Angela Merkel said in the year 2006. And so it will never make any sense to shut down nuclear power plants which are technically secure. We will have to use them as a bridge technology. And so they just corrected somehow her speech. So from the year 2011 on, the nuclear phase-out was one of the core principles of the German energy transition. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide. It's just to keep in mind that we are moving from, so that's the situation in 2014, so we are moving from an energy system that is centrally organized with a lot of thermal power plants in North Rhine-Westphalia, but also in the south of Germany, to an energy system, so that's the reference forecast of the German transmission system operators for the year 2025, to a system that is more and more decentral. So we can see a lot of photovoltaic development, so that's the purple bars in the south of Germany. And if we look at these beige bars, so that's wind onshore, which is mainly located in the north of Germany. What is a bit tricky is the question on the climate objectives. So even though we have this strong renewable development in the last years, if we look at the CO2 emissions in the German power sector, so that's you can see in this graph from the last 25 years, you can still see that there is a lot of lignite and hard coal, that it's brown and black in the German system. So these are the dominant CO2 producers in Germany. And if you look at this target path, so that's the purple line, you can see that we are currently above this target path. So there is a certain deviation, and to address this deviation, the German government presented in December 2014 a first action plan for climate protection. So here they want to take out some of these lignite capacities in order to close this deviation, to reduce this gap until the year 2020. And currently there are also plans to for the year 2050 to achieve these long-term ambitious climate targets for the year 2050. And it's obvious, if we really want to achieve these ambitious targets, we have to get rid of these coal power plants. And that is currently discussed. So we can say that the governance of the coal phase-out will determine the achievement of climate objectives, whereas the adaptation to this transformation will determine the survival of the utilities, because they are owning and operating these coal power plants. The market is already challenging a bit somehow the utilities in Germany, so that you can see in this table the average, so the wholesale market prices, the spot prices, they are decreasing constantly in the last years, and also the number of hours with very high electricity prices. So they really are more and more reduced, and so there are negative impacts for several market players, which result in the decommissioning of thermal units and intensified competition, financial losses, and shedding of jobs. The utilities are somehow adapting to this situation. For instance, E.ON and RWE, the largest utilities, they're restructuring themselves. Vattenfall, for instance, is even planning a partial market exit, so they're selling their lignite assets. But there's also, always if there is pressure, there's also room for innovation. So there is also the development of new business models. For the government, it's a tricky situation. So they need to find somehow a balance between industry policy. For instance, the energy-intensive industry, so the industrial consumers, they're benefiting of these low prices, whereas the utilities, they're suffering from these low prices. So we already have here to find a balance, but also on the costs. So it's the final consumers who have to pay, who have to finance the energy transition, and also the achievement of climate objectives. And it's not an easy challenge for the German government. We are moving, in terms of business models, we are moving towards more decentralized business models. And what is a bit obvious is that the startups and also the utilities, they're trying to put the final consumer more and more in the center of the business models. So there are new concepts based on decentralized prosumers, supply and demand flexibility, digital or multi-energy solutions. And well, one of the core fields of developments is everything around self-consumption, for instance, in Germany. Moreover, there are a lot of virtual power plants. So as we have these very small renewable installations, there are aggregators which are combining these installations in order to maximize the valorization and also to have the market entry, for instance, into the system services markets. Finally, there are also a lot of things is happening in the flexibility and storage sector, like development of batteries, power to heat, power to gas, heat storage systems, and so on. As I already said, there is a lot of renewable development in Germany. The government is trying to adapt to this situation. So, and that's a good example, I think, how the politics are also evolving over the time. So first of all, we started with the feed-in tariff. I think in the year 2012 it was introduced, and it was very successful that renewable electricity could enter into the German market. So this was also copy-pasted in other European countries. Here, the responsibilities for the renewable operators were rather small. So they just had to invest in a wind turbine, and they just get a fixed remuneration over the next 20 years. Then the government thought, well, it might be good that the renewable operators will get more responsibility. So they introduced a market premium scheme, and here the operators were obliged to sell the production at the spot market themselves. And this created a huge market for aggregators. And it was also quite successful. So this is what you can see in this graph on the lower right, that currently it's more than 50 gigawatt that is currently marketed by private companies in Germany. And the next phase is now the idea to switch towards a call for tender scheme, which is currently tested for photovoltaic pilot projects. Yeah, as for the market design, I don't want to enter too much into detail. Here, it's also the question, what is the right market design if we have all these renewables in the system? In Europe, there are different ways currently addressed. In France and in UK, it's rather a capacity market. In Germany, the government opted for, at least for the moment, for a further development of the energy-only market and against the introduction of a capacity market. I don't want to enter into details. I think what is important is that so currently there is this electricity market reform ongoing, but there are also a lot of other legal projects like cogeneration, smart grid development, electric vehicles. So it's a very ambitious energy political agenda that we can see at the moment. Yeah. So if we look a bit at the energy system in Germany, so we have more or less the demand centers, which are more located in the south of Germany and maybe in North Rhine-Westphalia. And now we're adding a lot of wind power in the north of Germany. So it's the big question how to transport all these this renewable power to the south. The government reacted to the situation with two legal projects. First of all, they identified priority network projects and tried to push the development, the reinforcement of the networks for these projects. There are already a lot of delays, but they're moving slowly. With some slow progress, they're moving on. Moreover, they also are planning to have like direct current lines, like huge network corridors from the north to the south of Germany. And here the idea is to bring the competences from the federal states more on a federal level, so that the process will accelerate. However, it's not really sure if this will work out. and also if there is acceptance in the society for these network projects. As the network development is somehow delayed, the result is that, well, we don't want to have a blackout. So what we are doing is that we are increasing the system services or for the system security. And these measures, they increased significantly in the last years. First of all, it's redispatching, so that's the thing that you are doing when you have a network congestion. You're ramping down and up thermal power plants in the north and in the south of Germany, but also the need for the renewable curtailment, so that you shut down renewable power plants. So this is increased dramatically in the last years. So now already 1% of the renewable electricity is curtailed in the German system. And it's clear that all these measures, they are quite costly, which leads us to the next topic, which is on the costs of the Energiewende and the allocation of costs and benefits. So it's really a topic that is quite controversially debated in Germany. First of all, between the regions. So, like, the idea is that maybe there are some regions where there are a lot of consumers, but maybe only few renewable installations, meaning that the consumers in these regions have to pay for the renewable installations in other federal states, meaning that they will transfer money to the investors and operators of those plants. Second, it's between the type of consumers. So maybe there are like landlords that invested in PV modules on the roof, so they benefit of low prices of self-consumed electricity, and the tenants, they have to finance this. And also the question of between the residential consumers who usually have to finance all these renewable developments and other issues, and the industrial consumers on the other side, they are often exempted. And so there are a lot of debates ongoing on national level, but also on European level, because there are also questions with regard to state aid. So this was, despite we have this very high costs and these debates on the allocation of costs, the Energiewende still benefits of a strong support in the German society. So this is what you can see in the graph on the upper right. Still more than 90% of the Germans are supporting the renewable deployment. And the reason is that, or the argumentation behind this is that the Energiewende revives the democracy. It allows for the empowerment of citizens. And that's really a crucial point, because if we look at who invested in Germany in the renewable installations, we can see that it's about 35% is private individuals, meaning people like landlords, owner of houses that invested into PV modules on their own roof, for instance, or maybe also farmers that invested into biomass installations in their surroundings. Apart from this empowerment of citizens, it's also a kind of industrial policy, so that Germany wants to play a role model or wants to push the German industry, the manufacturers, to be the pioneers in the field of like smart grid development or power to gas or hydrogen mobility. But it's clear with all these increase of costs that we can observe in the last years, and also less possibilities to participate actively. So this new call for tender schemes might hinder a bit the active participation of citizens and of cooperatives. So this will be crucial tests for the acceptance of the Energiewende in the future. So this shifting towards a more decentralized system creates a lot of opportunities. So in the last years, there were lots of local initiatives created that aim, for instance, at climate protection, sustainable development, and the creation of local added value. So you can see at the upper right, for instance, the map of the initiative, 100% renewable energy regions. But there are dozens or maybe hundreds of such kind of local initiatives. You can see biomass regions. You even have, I think, that's not my one, no? Okay. I think we even have a championship for geothermal energy in Germany. So it's really it's quite a lot. And they have the idea to create local added value. So I think that's quite important. The projects are very heterogeneous, and they involve several stakeholders, like local politics because they want to be elected, project developers because they want to earn money, craftsmen, environmental agency, manufacturers. The projects create interesting opportunities. Sometimes they involve also like urban development. We have at IFA an interesting project with the Tegel airport, which might be converted into an interesting industrial site in the future or technology site in the future. However, it's interesting that these local initiatives, they're mostly not coordinated on national level, meaning that if every region in Germany would aim at to be 100% renewable, at least on an annual balance, this might really cause a lot of problems for the energy system. So there can be really huge contradictions to national targets. There are lots of different examples of these local projects. I just want to pick out one example, which is called Mieterstrom, and this is really shooting out like mushrooms currently in Germany. So the idea is to have a local application of distributed generation in residential buildings, most of the time using photovoltaics or cogeneration. As I said before, usually it were people who have their own houses who invested in photovoltaics, and now it's also that they just put a lot of PV modules at the roofs of apartment buildings, so that also the tenants will receive this self-produced electricity, which is at the end economically interesting because there is a lower tax and surcharge burden for local electricity. So this is what you can see in this graph. So this is what when you consume electricity purely from the grid, from your usual supplier. But if you would use locally produced electricity, you can have lower electricity costs. The projects are very heterogeneous, again, in terms of project size. So it could be a huge apartment building with 1,000 dwellings maybe, but only maybe sometimes a two-family house. On the evolved parties, sometimes it's the housing industry, and sometimes it's a cooperative. Also the legal configuration, which you can already see here, it's depending on the interpretation of law, how much money you will save. There are a lot of gray zones also ongoing. And the motivations behind. So if it's the housing industry, it's usually economics is usually the driver, but maybe for a cooperative, it's maybe rather idealism, so to do something good for the environment. This development, it represents a large energy political and socio-political lever, meaning that giving a large group of the society, the tenants, the opportunity of an active participation in the Energiewende, with some pitfalls, because at the end, it's still somebody who has to pay all these renewable installations. So there are a lot of examples where local players can really gain from the energy transition. However, if we look at the traditional local players in Germany, so the municipal energy suppliers, the Stadtwerke, there are some interesting developments ongoing. So in Germany, there are about 850 Stadtwerke existing, and most of them, they are completely owned by the municipality. So it's an interesting construct between these two. And if we look at, and over the last years, usually the municipalities, they benefited a lot from their Stadtwerke because they received dividend payments, so they could also like cross-finance public transport or also the swimming pools that belongs to the municipality. However, in the last years, the situation changed. For instance, Stadtwerke Gera went bankrupt in 2014 with a debt of more than 200 million euro. The city of Duisburg had to save its Stadtwerke, providing a 200 million euro loan. And there are lots of other examples. The reasons, they vary among the Stadtwerke and municipalities. So sometimes it's the dropping market prices that I addressed in the beginning of my presentation. So that's maybe an Energiewende reason. But sometimes it's also just like management mistakes or problems in the non-energy sector. But it's obvious that once a Stadtwerk is in a financial distress, there is a strong and immediate impact on the budget of the respective municipality. There is an interesting study from KPMG that analyzed 93 Stadtwerke municipalities. And if we look at this table, so using quantitative and qualitative criteria like EBITDA margins, or if they are participating in debt rescheduling programs, for instance. And if we look at the table, we can see that for about 25 of the Stadtwerke, they're already in a bad financial situation. And for those, it's quite interesting because as the municipality is also in a difficult financial situation, they might not really hope for a strong financial support of the municipality. So there is a certain chance that for those 25% of the Stadtwerke, that they might go bankrupt in the future. Well, KPMG also observed some indicators and trends that have an influence on the financial situation. So like, for instance, the smaller Stadtwerke, they are usually better off than larger ones, and so on. And I think usually I should now run out of time. So I come over to the conclusions. So if we look at the Energiewende, it's already interesting that there is neither a common definition nor a common vision in the German society on the Energiewende itself. So there is a lot of self-serving interests ongoing. So far, the Energiewende is very much focused on the power sector. However, it's interesting that currently the discussion shifts towards a stronger emphasis on the buildings, transport, and heat sector, and still also with the interactions with the power sector. So we're moving on, I think, in this field. The big utilities, they were rather surprised and affected by the dynamics over the last years. And also the government rather played a reactive role than an active role. Despite the rapid growth of renewables, the energy system seems stable. However, the security of supply depends on several system measures that are increasingly used and that are also quite expensive. The decentralization of the energy systems creates a lot of interesting opportunities and also a local added value, but not all local actors are benefiting. And if we look at the agenda stays quite ambitious and the challenges numerous. So on the short term, there are all these legal projects that are ongoing on the electricity market reform, on distribution networks, the rollout of smart grids and electric vehicles. And on the long terms, there are a lot of questions in the field like decarbonization of the energy sector, but maybe also the guarantee of security of supply, the acceptance of the society in terms of costs, allocation of costs, and also the active participation in the Energiewende in the future. So this local national governance might be really something very crucial for the future. So I thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Bastian. Tu as bien présenté l'essentiel de l'Energiewende avec ses différentes composantes techniques, politiques, économiques. Et donc maintenant, nous allons accueillir Jens Köhrsen de l'Université de Bâle qui va prolonger cette réflexion sur la transition énergétique en Allemagne en mettant un accent sur le rôle des communes. Jens.
Hello, everybody. I was just let know that I shouldn't walk around, and I'm used to walk around a lot when I give presentations, so it will be a hard time for me. And I will rather sit down. I will try to sit down and not move a lot because of the cameras. They have to follow me, okay. And it's a bit difficult. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Also, thank you very much for this nice introduction to the national context. The study that I'm going to present is focusing on two local cases, the case of Emden and of Bottrop. you see a lot of names here. The first one is my one, and then there are two other names. I placed them there because these two other people, Andreas Huber and Jannika Mattes, were also involved in this case study. That's why they are there. Yeah? Oh yeah, sorry. Now we'll sit. Yeah, I was sorry. Yeah, I guess now you can hear me. Yeah, perfect. It's strange to sit, actually. Okay. The study was that we conducted was undertaken by 3 institutes. It was LATS from Paris, the IFER, and the University of Oldenburg. And it was, the name of the whole project was Composite. I don't actually know what that means anymore. It's a long title for the project, and it was sponsored by ADM. And I have to let you know that my presentation may be a bit more than 30 minutes, but let me know when the 30 minutes are over, and I will be very quick. So all of the people that were involved in this study, the 3 people mentioned here, are sociologists. So as sociologists, we have a specific perspective on things, which is maybe different from other researchers working on energy transitions. For us, it was much more about the relationships of different types of actors in these localities. As you have already heard from the presentation before, there's a lot of decentralization in the energy sector going on in Germany. So cities and towns are becoming more and more important in the energy sector. And in these cities and towns, there are different types of actors, not only energy suppliers or producers interacting with each other in order to spur local energy transition processes. So if we have politicians, for instance, entrepreneurs, people from civil society, researchers, and all these types of actors are somehow interacting with each other. But there's little knowledge so far in research about the interplay of these different types of actors, because most research generally focus on specific types of actors, such as, for instance, public utilities and their role in energy transitions, or politicians or entrepreneurs. And often research focuses also on specific technologies, such as solar panels, for instance, or wind energy. So there's always a specific focus on something, a specific actor or a specific technology. But there are little encompassing perspectives on these local transition processes that take all the different types of actors into account. And that's what we try to do, actually. So our idea was to generate a comprehensive perspective on what is going on in these 2 cities. We wanted to know what types of actors are engaged in the local transition processes and how they organize their interplay. So the main questions were, how do actors interact, and what type of arrangements evolve over time in order to structure their organization in these cities. We used a rather explorative research design, but we still had a kind of heuristical approach that we used, which was a regional innovation systems approach. The regional innovation systems approach supposes that we have innovation processes in regions. We have different types of subsystems contributing to these innovation processes. So, for instance, you see the different subsystems that could contribute to these innovation processes, like politics, industry, civil society, etc. We use this approach in order to study local energy transition. So we said there are probably different types of actors, different subsystems contributing to these local transition processes. And these were ordered along these subsystems or social spheres. Politics, industry, civil society, research and education, banking, municipal administration, and intermediaries. And each of these subsystems contributes probably with a specific function to local transitions. But this does not mean that in each city, each of the subsystems has to contribute, actually. It's just, in some cities, there may be even some of these subsystems not contributing or hindering the process of local transition. In other cities, specific subsystems may assume a dominant role in these local transitions. So I call these different, we don't have to call them subsystems, you can also call them social spheres, and these act along different logics and have different actors in them. They often speak different languages, but they still have to interact with each other at the local level in order to implement local transitions. So that was a bit of theory now, and now come to the real, let's say, the real meat, the real empirical stuff. I will present first the methods of my study, then I will come to each of the case studies and present the main results and insights. Then I will compare both case studies, and after that I will finish with a short conclusion. So we had two cities, Bottrop and Emden. We chose them because these two cities are known in Germany as pioneering cities in local transition processes. They have the fame of, or the reputation of being good cities in the local energy transitions. And as you see here, one is located in the north of Germany. It's a city in the coast, a harbor city. This is Emden, and the other one is located rather in the middle of Germany. Both are located in the west. In order to study the transition processes in each city, we conducted lots of interviews with actors from these different spheres. Well, so we tried to interview those actors from each of the spheres that I mentioned before that are most involved in the local transition process. So when it was about banks, we focused on those banks that are somehow involved in the local transitions, and we spoke to representatives from these banks. And the same for the industrial sector. We spoke to people that are from the industrial sector and are doing stuff in the local energy transition. We also did document analysis in order to find out what is going on. So we've analyzed reports and home pages, etc. Those cities are, I would say, medium-sized cities in Germany. So they're not really big, but they're like, Emden is rather small, and Bottrop is rather middle-sized. Both cities have ambitious climate goals, as you see here, and they have different focus in their energy transition processes. In Bottrop, it's more about energy efficiency. It's about public buildings and housing and transport. And in northern Germany, in Emden, it's more about renewables, energy production, and specifically about wind energy, of course, as you already saw in the presentation before. We have different dominant actors in each of the city. In Bottrop, there's one main actor that is very important. It's an intermediary organization called Innovation City GmbH. And in Emden, it's a bit different. We have a lot of different dominant actors that somehow steer or govern, but not really govern, as you will see, the local transition process. A particularity of both cities is that that there's no, let's say, strong incumbent that would hinder energy transition processes. So they are not really, these are not really conflictual processes. Here you see a bit the interviews that we conducted with representatives, or a number of interviews that we conducted with representatives from different subsystems. Now we'll come to the first case study. I will speak a bit less about the case study of Bottrop because I don't know that well about the case study of Bottrop because I didn't conduct it, to be honest. It was my colleague Andreas Huber who conducted it, and I will just summarize the main results from it. I conducted the case study of Emden. I will speak a bit more about Emden afterwards. So Bottrop is what we could call a traditional energy city. It's a city that was based on coal mining a lot, but coal mining is not anymore a really good business model, let's say. It's in crisis, and there will be the last coal mine closing in 2018. So the city was struggling somehow with its industrial background and had to reinvent itself. And one form of reinventing itself was to transform the energy sector. So there was, it's a kind of early starter city in the energy transition. It started already in the 80s with the first projects, and there were a lot of energy conservation measures in public buildings. And given to its early ambitions and initiatives, it received the Energy Gold Award in 2009 already. And there were also a lot of private sector activities, such as in wind energy, photovoltaics, etc., etc. But there was something very important happening in 2010 for the energy transition in Bottrop, which was the successful application for Innovation City. Innovation City was a competition that was run by the Regionalverband Ruhr, which is an association of 70 major industry businesses in the region that were offering this title and money to the city that was presenting the most convincing project of like reinventing itself. And the project that Bottrop presented was the idea to transform a whole city area, a huge district of the city, into a low carbon area. And this district has around 70,000 inhabitants, so it's half of the city, it's half of the population, it's huge. And the idea or the objective is to reduce the CO2 emissions in the city area by 50% until 2020, measured by standards, by 2010 standards. So it's a lot, it's huge, it's very, very ambitious. And in order to do this, so they got this, and they got the money, and in order to do this, they founded a kind of business, an intermediary organization, which is called Innovation City GmbH, which governs the local transition process. And this Innovation City GmbH is bringing together a lot of local actors, and it's generating plans and implementing local projects with a lot of local partners from different areas. So there are more than 100 individual projects going on now in Bottrop in order to get to this objective. When we focus on the subsystems that I mentioned to you before in the beginning, we can identify some dominant subsystems and actors. Very important was the city administration in the beginning of, specifically in the beginning of the transition process in Bottrop, because people from different departments of the city administration worked together in a very collaborative form in order to bring this application for the Innovation City, to apply for this Innovation City title. Politics were also important, but not that important. My colleague calls them willing enablers. So they were supportive. They said, okay, we are going to help you. But they were not those that really initiated all this. It's rather the people from the city administration, which is interesting. You would rather suppose it's politics that does this, but it's not. But there was one person from politics who was very important, the charismatic ex-mayor of the city. He was creating a lot of alliances in the region and in the locality to bring, to spur this, this process. And after having received the title of Innovation City, it was mostly one actor who's important, which is the intermediary, the Innovation City GmbH that I mentioned before to you. So this intermediary acts as a steering organization by integrating representatives from different systems into its planning committees and controlling committees, and brings them together and governs the local energy transition process. So it's a very centralized process. And within this centralized process, the industrial subsystem is also playing a very important role. It's very strongly present within this intermediary in form of projects. And there is also the research system, which is very important in form of the Hochschule Ruhr-West, it's a local university, the Fraunhofer Institute and the Wuppertal Institute. They are also participating a lot in the local energy transition and in this Innovation City GmbH. But what you will probably be missing from this is civil society and people. What are they doing? They're doing nothing? No. They are doing stuff, but they are not integrated into this, actually. And that's something that we'll come to back later. So you see a very centralized, steered, governed, controlled transition process. Very different from what we will see now in the case of Emden. Emden has a kind of similar background. It also experienced an industrial crisis. There was a declining ship sector, so they worked a lot on shipbuilding, and they have a harbor, and both things are not that important anymore. So they regarded renewables as an opportunity, and it was specifically the mayor and some other actors that regarded renewables as an opportunity to get out of this crisis. So they engaged, in order to signal that they're interested in renewables, they engaged very early with renewables and the energy transition. So in 1987, they constructed the first windmill, and in the early 90s, they constructed the first wind park. And at this time, it was not very lucrative to do that. It was actually a very controversial move to do that, because there was no sign of gaining any money with constructing a huge wind farm in Emden. But they did it in order to signal that they are doing stuff in this, and in order to attract other investments in the wind energy sector. The energy change actions were pushed specifically by four types of actors: the ex-mayor, the leading employee of the city administration, the CEO of the public utility, and an entrepreneur. And these actors, they knew each other. They were somehow friends, let's say, and they interacted in a very informal manner with each other. So there was no formal control gremium or something like that in the case of Emden. Here you see examples of what happened afterwards. It was a kind of success, this signaling of interest in the energy transition. Because if you see now the harbor here, you see that there are a lot of businesses now in the harbor that are very big, like Enercon, for instance, and they are producing wind turbine towers, for instance. And there's one production facility which was for ships that converted itself in a production place for tree pods for offshore wind farms. So, but besides these things, there are a lot of local things going on. And these local things that are going on are very much based on the collaboration of local actors. So there are local projects such as the idea to construct the first power-to-gas facility. Power to gas is the idea to store wind energy. So they're producing a lot of wind energy. We have huge wind farms now in Emden, and there's no place left around Emden to construct any wind turbine anymore. So what they do is they have to repower now. So you have lots and lots and lots of wind turbines there, and now they have to think about how to store the wind energy. And an idea to do this is to convert wind energy, wind power, into gas in order to store it. And they want to construct the first facility for that. In order to do this, there's a collaboration between the public utility and the science system in form of the local university. Another very interesting project that's also collaborative is an energy education project. All school children in Emden, in every grammar school in Emden, have to go to an energy transition or energy efficiency boot camp. So in every school class, they have classes taught about energy efficiency. And this is done by the city administration, the local ecology center, the industry, and schools. So there's a lot of collaboration going on in Emden. And if you look at the subsystems that I mentioned before, you see that every subsystem in Emden is contributing with a specific way, with a specific function to the local transition process. So politics, for instance, it's contributing with political decision-making, supportive political decision-making to this process. Then there's a municipal administration that contributes with its own projects, but also with a kind of administrative support for every project that is related to the local transition. Then there's the industry constructing wind farms and implementing energy efficiency measures. We have the local university, which offers a specific student curriculum in energy efficiency and is doing research projects with local partners. So we have each of them somehow is doing something. And it looks very organized, but it's not. There's no organization there. Nothing. There's no central organization that would bring all these actors together. They're intermediaries, but they are not central, not at all. And if you look at it from a, well, it's something that I draw when I did my research. It doesn't look very professional. I'm sorry for that. But it's showing how these actors are networked. And you see there's a big industry there. There's a local industry here. Then we have politics, civil society, NGOs, a bit marginalized. And so you see we have different types of actors. And there's a kind of core of actors that are in the center of this network. And they are really closely networked to each other, but on an informal basis. They're just friends. They know each other, or sometimes they're not really friends, to be honest. But they know each other. They interact on a local basis with each other. Sometimes they just meet on a market when they're doing shopping and speaking about stuff. Nothing more. So what's going on in Emden is what I believe is somehow a kind of negotiation of the local transition in informal networks, and these, and also in the public sphere. And this can be described in the form of a local field of different actors, and some of these actors have more power in the local transition, and others have less power. And that's a field model that I use to describe what is happening in Emden. There are, of course, different ideas of what the energy transition should be. So there are different actors with different interests in the local energy transition. There are some actors that are just interested in opportunities, so in gains such as political votes, or in making money out of the energy transition, or in the feeling morally well or whatever. And there are other actors that have different ideas of what the local transition should be, such as saving the environment. And these actors relate to each other in the public sphere, but also in informal networks. And what happens through this interaction process is that there are some notions of what the local energy transition should be that thrive and are then imposed by some dominant actors. I have to. Okay. I'm stopping now. Well, I guess I'm not going to present that because it will be too long. I just wanted to say at some moment in Emden there was one actor coming in, which was an international investor, a Danish power company, which wanted to construct a coal power plant in Emden. And this led to a kind of crisis in the local energy transition, which was then somehow defended by the local actors. So there was a strong opposition to the construction of the local power plant in this sector of actors that somehow defended the local transition process. So there are struggles, and there were some actors on the side of this opportunity, that were in favor of constructing the coal power plant. I hope this wasn't too confusing. I will now compare both cases really briefly along governance and coordination, inclusiveness and evolution. If we look at Bottrop, we see a very centralized energy transition process, which is governed by one actor, the Innovation City GmbH, which integrates all the other subsystems but excludes some others. That's relating to the inclusiveness, because there's a power concentration in one actor. And some actors just fall out of it, such as the citizens. And the evolution is taking place in a kind of strategic, planned way. So what's going on in Bottrop is very strategically planned. In the case of Emden, it's rather it's coordinated in a totally different way. It's not coordinated, we could say, or doesn't look coordinated. It's just interaction that's taking place in informal networks, and there are some loosely coordinated key actors that have more power. They are publicly more visible. They have a stronger impact, and so there's some power concentration among these actors. And if you're not part of these local networks, it's hard for you to steer the local energy transition or to have an impact on the local energy transition process. So it looks a bit, in general, looks a bit more democratic, but it's still about local networks, and there are no formal entry points to have an impact on the local transition. As it is not governed by central planning, it's rather a lot of emergent individual strategies coming together, creating a kind of contingent pathway in the case of Emden. So there are a lot of actors with different strategies, and they come together from time to time. They interact, and then there are some strategies coming out of this, but these are not any planned strategies. Now I will come to the conclusion. What is interesting is that we see two totally different types of energy transition in the two cities. Despite the fact that we have the same national context, we'll say, no, it's the same national politics, these transitions in local spaces were totally different from each other sometimes. And these transitions do not so much depend on the national context somehow, but on local institutional context and actor constellations. But still, politics on the national level can provide a supportive context. For instance, the feed-in tariffs for renewables were very important in the case of Emden, but maybe not that much in the case of Bottrop. And there are also limits for local politics. In both cases, you see that local politics assume some role, but they are not maybe not the most important actors for the local energy transition. There are other actors that are related to other subsystems, such as the industry or the municipal administration, that play often a more important role than local political actors. And it's often about the close collaboration between these actors rather than individual actors doing some stuff. So it's more about relationships. This I have to say as a sociologist, of course. This is bringing me to the research perspectives. I think there's really an important need for comparative research about local transitions. And this research should be not about individual actors, but about what is really happening in these cities between these different types of actors. So it should be encompassing, comprehensive research about the interplay of different types of actors in cities. It would be interesting to conduct these studies in different regional and national contexts in order to see in what way varying regional and national contexts affect these local transitions. So what are the national conditions and the regional conditions for spurring a specific local transition process? It would be interesting also to see the interplay of different scales, so like local, regional, national, and this research. And this could, if we do this, this could lead us to a general classification of different types of local transition processes, for instance, along different types of coordination, local governance, that could help us to understand what types of local transitions fit to what local context and what type of transitions are more feasible in specific local contexts. So that's all from me. I've just mentioned the publication. There you can read it, what we did in a more proper way. And there's another publication from me, which is very much focusing on the role of religious actors in transition processes. In the case of Emden, because I'm also a sociologist of religion, so I'm interested in what religion is doing in all this, if it's doing anything. So thank you very much. I hope.
Merci beaucoup Jens d'avoir partagé les résultats des études auxquelles vous avez participé et qui montrent effectivement des positions différentes et complémentaires suivant les deux villes présentées. Et donc c'est l'intérêt des cas d'études, c'est justement de pouvoir s'appuyer sur des exemples très concrets avec justement des illustrations sur l'impact du contexte et de la façon dont les sujets sont pris en charge collectivement d'une façon centralisée, décentralisée, comme vous l'avez bien précisé.